Good morning. I'm Sam Filler. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. Thank you for joining us today for the official launch of the New York Wine's Marketing Toolkit for industry members and our trade and media friends all over the world. The board and staff of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation are proud to finally share the culmination of our first big step in our New York Wine's brand expansion project. The goal of this initiative began in 2002, and it was to start building tools and resources that would help define, elevate, and amplify the brand of New York wine to a global trade, media, and consumer audience. The New York assets that you'll see today were created based on feedback from you, representatives of the wineries, restaurants, retailers, other stakeholders in partnership with the foundation board, staff, and the expert team at Born Collective. And I want to add that, we view this as sort of like walking gum and chewing, or chewing gum and walking. And what I mean by that is, any good wine association worth their salt puts together these generic marketing assets to great effect. So some examples I really like are the Austrian Wine Board, the Australian Wine Board. Some of the regions in France do a nice job. And then here domestically, I think the Oregon Wine Board does an excellent job putting together generic assets and making them available to their industry. And so the whole idea of the resource page that we have, we took out of Oregon's playbook, which they have available. So if you're interested in seeing what they do, they're sort of, I think, the leading examples of how to do this effectively. And while this project began last spring, this has been part of a multi-year effort to refresh the branding of the foundation. So we started with retiring Uncork New York, which became Boldly New York. And today you'll see the next evolution of both Boldly New York and our marketing campaign for New York wines. So today we're pleased to welcome the Born Collective team to this webinar. Dwayne and Dion. They'll provide you with an overview of those assets and give you insight into how the pieces generally fit, are meant to fit together and create a consistent, accurate, and inspirational branding for our industry. With that said, this is just the beginning, and we know you may have questions about specific use scenarios for your own company, or you may have suggestions or edits or a great idea for how it would be really helpful in your work. We want to hear about all of that. I think most important to note is that we welcome that feedback, because we plan to continually invest in this brand identity, continue to refresh it, improve it. And so we encourage you to submit your own thoughts about current or future tools that you would like to see. There's a feedback form linked right at the top of the new resources page on our website, so you can put all your comments and what you love, what you hate, what you want to see right there. We want it. And so we do want to recognize our partners on this project, our funding partners. So we want to thank our partners at the USDA Market Access Program, the Genesee Valley Regional Market Authority, and of course the New York State Department of Ag and Markets. Without them, this project would not have been possible. So big kudos to them, and they're really helping, I think, our industry move forward and be considered in the same light as Austria, Australia, and Oregon. So we hope you're excited as we are to share these new marketing tools with you and your audiences. We believe they'll help lay the foundation for a more thorough, consistent, and impactful understanding of New York wines, what our industry stands for, and ultimately increase brand awareness and sales in key markets globally, not just in Rochester. So without further ado, I'm pleased to hand today's webinar over to Dwayne Bombard and Dion Pender, our friends from the Born Collective, who were primarily responsible for the tools you'll see today. It's been a real pleasure to work with them for so many months, and we will look forward to what the future holds. So Dion and Dwayne, passing it over to you.
All right, thanks, Sam. As I start to share my screen, I'm going to say a couple of things. One, it really has been one of the great privileges in my career and Dion's career, because we've talked a lot about this, in working with the foundation and the members of the wine industry to work on this and help create some of these tools. Many people on this webinar contributed to the research, the background to allow us to do this. So I wanted to say thank you. It's been an education for us, and really one of the great experiences that we've had. I also want to mention, I believe Sam touched on a little bit about, there is a section for questions at the end. Feel free. I know the questions pop up when you raise your hand, and we can field those as we go along, or there certainly will be time, probably ample time at the end for questions. And the last thing I want to say is I had the terrible misfortune of getting a new laptop yesterday, and I think everything is smooth. If there are any glitches, I sincerely apologize. So we are here today, and hopefully everybody's seeing screen advance. Why are we here? We are here certainly to talk about the marketing toolkit and that Sam has mentioned, and the assets that we put together in this effort in kind of elevating and promoting New York State wines. We are here to take New York wine to a higher place ultimately. So with every passing year, New York has taken an increasingly prominent place in the world of wine. We're no longer a secret, and we're taking our rightful spot with other leading wine growing regions around the globe. While word of mouth has always been instrumental in shaping public opinion, we have to do more than that. We have to do our part with influential messaging that makes its way to consumers directly in certain circumstances, indirectly through influencers, but persistently with a consistent story of bold New York wine quality, taste, and experience. So to do that, we're engaged in this ongoing process of creating tools and assets to promote New York wine. You're going to see a lot of those today. We're going to talk about how you can access them via this resources page that Sam mentioned. But it is important to note that it is an ongoing process. We created a finite set of these tools. Again, as Sam indicated, we are very, very interested in people's thoughts about what would be useful to them. If you have anything, we'll give you kind of a mechanism at the end to communicate those thoughts, because this process is not over with. So this global messaging marketing toolkit will communicate the diversity of the varieties we grow and the consistent excellence of our cool climate wines. That's a theme you're going to see throughout this entire thing. New York State is incredibly diverse, but we want to tell, even with all that uniqueness and diversity, we want to tell a consistent story so that we're all talking the same way, all talking from the same talk track, all kind of armed with the same information about the excellence of New York State wines. And the kit's assets will enable you to simultaneously promote New York wines and your own role in our increasing reputation of excellence. Obviously, we want to raise the tide in New York State. That's good for everybody. And in the act of doing that, we recognize that each individual contributing member, business, entity, winery, vineyard, retailer, you're also going to promote your own business at the same time. And obviously there's good on both ends of that. So before, we didn't want to just come in and drop this new, this toolkit, the new portions of the brand family, because there are some, and we're going to spend a little bit of time coming up here next talking about those without kind of informing and paying tribute to the process that brought us here. So how did we arrive at what you're going to see? Essentially, we did it by harvesting the input from a number of sources, including, I mentioned at the very beginning, many people on this webinar, wine enthusiasts, some of whom are regular purchasers of New York wines, and some who are unconvinced about its quality. We kicked off our engagement with the New York Wine and Grain Foundation in a discovery and research process, and found out a lot about the wine drinkers, current wine drinkers of New York wines and potential wine drinkers of New York wines. There are some who have tried it and are convinced that of New York wine's excellence, but admittedly, there are some out there that are a little more suspicious, a little hesitant, perhaps, and those are the people that we're gonna influence and convince with some of the materials you're going to see today. We talked to subject matter experts in cool climate viticulture and the history of wine growing in New York, probably my favorite part of the whole process. lived here my whole life and have been a wine drinker much of that life. Yet it was a completely fascinating educational process for me. We talked to representatives of each AVA who are intimately familiar with the grapes, the growing conditions, and the history of their area. New York, through this marketing kit, we are obviously trying to promote New York wines in general, but the act of wine drinking, we've certainly discovered from our research and just personal experience and practical knowledge, it's also geographic. It's geographic sometimes when you walk into that wine store, but it's geographic when you make a visit to Long Island or Upper Hudson or the Finger Lakes, and you're going to make the tour and taste and purchase wines. Then you're interested in the specifics about that particular wine growing region, that particular AVA. So it was important for us to understand and make those distinctions. Yes, the state is all cool climate, but New York or Long Island differs from the Niagara Escarpment, from Lake Erie, from Upper Hudson. So we want to make those distinctions. And then we talked to trade and media representatives who brought a really interesting kind of peripheral views to the discovery process about what they need, what they would find useful for them to help influence, write stories, talk to diners, and do all those things to help really influence people to try, become regular wine drinkers, and ultimately become advocates for New York State wine. So we gathered that information to form a messaging strategy that includes expanded messaging that's built on existing Boldly New York messages and themes. Critically important to understand. We came to this process, Born Collective as an agency, after the rebrand from Uncorked to New York to Boldly New York. And we are huge fans. It was really eye-opening for us, members of the industry. We saw when that brand kind of was adopted and rolled out, and it was fascinating that it describes the wines, it describes the spirit even more than the wines, and that Boldly New York brand is going to continue to anchor everything that we do, and we think it captures the spirit of the wine industry in New York very well. I mentioned specific messaging for each of New York's 7 AVAs. Will also include promotional tactics that can be used in a variety of settings and channels, including, everybody's favorite channels that are virtually free or very inexpensive, like social media and electronic distribution, and then other kinds as well. And then graphics to promote New York wines as a whole and each individual AVA, knowing that when media writes a story about the Finger Lakes AVA or the Hudson River region, that some arming them with a consistent set of graphics that they can add to their stories and can kind of take it to the next level is really a valuable tool. So before we dive into that toolkit, which we know everybody's interested to see, let's see the tactics, let's see the materials that are going to help me promote New York wines. We really need to talk a little bit, take a bit of a detour to talk about the New York State wine brand family. I mentioned just seconds ago that it continues to be defined by the Boldly New York brand. But as we worked with the foundation and went through this process of developing new materials, the brand expanded, quite honestly. It's now a family with 3 distinct and yet unified, again, that theme of unique and unified at the same time, members. And we're going to touch a little bit on this. We didn't want to present promotional materials that had brand elements that left you scratching your head. So we decided we're going to take a brief detour in to discuss each one of the elements of the brand family. I will say, much more detailed information along these lines is available in the brand guidelines. It's a much more comprehensive document that talks about each one of these members of the family and gives rules and guidelines, but it also gives kind of the thinking and the strategy behind each portion of the brand family. That's available on that resources page that we'll talk about near the end of this presentation. But this is just a sampling so that you understand the kind of the genesis of each portion of it and how they work together. So I mentioned this theme that runs throughout everything we do: unique, and unified at the same time. We are a unique group of individuals, but we're a unified group within the industry. We do different things, but ultimately we all do the same things. We are individually innovative and collectively challengers of the status quo. We're guided by a brand that is a reflection of who we are, unique and unified at the same time, able to support individual entities, but joined together in spirit and against the doubters. This is the power of brand. A well-done brand can talk to different audiences, say different things to different audiences, but it's always unified. And this is the brand. This is certainly the Boldly New York brand, the brand of our industry in New York State. So we need to start, it's the logical place to start when we're talking about brand in New York. We're going to talk about Boldly New York first. Maybe the more perceptive or astute viewers out there have noticed, and I know the foundation put out a communication along these lines, you're going to see a slightly evolved visual representation of Boldly New York. And at the end of this section, Dion will kind of take us through the thinking behind that and the changes that are kind of visible in the Boldly New York brand, and explain why we did that. But before we do that, we want to talk about the bigger aspects of the brand. And we'll do that by starting talking about the brand itself and the role it plays moving forward. So Boldly New York is an attitude, it's an umbrella, and it's a foundation in both senses of the word, small f and capital F. If there's a chief characteristic of New York wines, it's our diversity. We're distinct wine growing regions. We are unique winemakers with innovative ideas. We're different businesses owned by families with roots in many nations, not large entities run by multinational corporations in most cases. A little aside there, hugely appealing to our audience based on our research. The fact that it's small family wineries, that each one offers a different experience. That is one of the big selling points of New York State wines to the consumer. And with all those differences, there are things that unite us. Our cool climate is one. Despite individual microclimates, we're all ripening grapes and practicing our craft in a climate others thought wasn't conducive to fine wines. Our nonconformist attitude is another. Just taste a few vintages from across the state for proof that we don't listen to naysayers, the followers, or the faint of heart. And our brand is the thing that captures it all and that unites us. Boldly New York is the living manifestation of where we came from, what we stand for, and where we're headed. And it will continue to represent us as New York wine continues to soar. Boldly New York is not going anywhere. It continues to be the parent brand, the umbrella, the attitude that unites us, and really the foundation for everything we do. So the role that the brand is playing moving forward is kind of twofold. It's the outward manifestation of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation and essentially the wine industry in New York. And it's a unifying element for the programs and activities that the foundation presents. So let's kind of divide that in half and talk about the two portions of that. Boldly New York is the brand of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. In communications from the foundation, from the website to webinars to emails, if a deliverable or tactic comes from the foundation to its constituents, it should be part of the New York brand, the Boldly New York brand, and follow its guidelines. We're not necessarily insulating Boldly New York from the consumer audience, but it was developed to describe and capture the wine industry in New York, and it's best suited for those affiliated audiences. Something comes from the foundation, Boldly New York is going to lead, and we're going to show you a couple examples. It's always better to see concrete examples after you've talked about something in theory because it really brings it home and makes it clear. Boldly New York also serves as the unifying element for the programs, events, and awards, such as the New York Wine Classic, the New York Sustainable Wine Growing Program, and the New York Wines Export Program, among others, that are presented by the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. Now, each one of these is likely to have an identity of its own. We've seen that they all have, different kind of visual identities and almost brands of their own, but they should be inspired by the Boldly New York brand elements. Given the origin and pedigree, their unique identity should feel like offspring of that parent brand. That's critically important to note moving forward. And when you see the two new elements of the New York brand that were developed, hopefully they represent that as well. We're confident that they do, that they feel like offspring with the same DNA as Boldly New York. So like a good parent, as their progenies venture out into the world, they should be present, but in a supporting role, having supplied their DNA and having a vested interest in their success. So they'll play Boldly New York when it's the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, essentially inside the wine industry in New York. Boldly New York takes the lead. But when it's some of these other things, it can also act as in a supporting role as a sponsor of these other entities that come out of the New York State wine industry. So some examples of how the Boldly New York brand kind of takes that lead role. Now, obviously, Sam's business card, from the foundation, Boldly New York is the primary brand. It really identifies, it's the identifiable brand that leads. A brochure that's put together by the foundation. Again, Boldly New York, boldly out in front. Whoops. Sorry about that. I'm not sure how I ended up way back there. Information sheets for lots of different aspects of the industry. Again, Boldly New York, and you're starting to see different colors of Boldly New York, the Boldly New York brand, and that evolved Boldly New York brand that Dion will talk about. Newsletters, email communications, and then the NewYorkWines.org website in itself. Again, Boldly New York, very prominently out in front. That is the brand that defines the industry, defines our attitude in New York State. So I think that's the end of this section. Dion, if you want to kind of take over and talk about the changes that happened to that Boldly New York visual identity.
Sure. So while we were developing some of the other work, one of the things that became apparent to us is it was a good time to evolve the Boldly New York logo. One of the things that I think we found challenging was when the logo was used in smaller applications. The typeface was actually very, very hard and difficult to read. And also at the same time, it didn't feel as modern as some of the materials that we were creating. So we opted to not outright change it, but to evolve it, just to update it in some ways that we felt were beneficial. We changed the typeface, the typography, so that the Boldly type wasn't as thin, so it would reproduce nicely. It still feels very traditional, like the previous logo, but it is using the font that was currently in the Boldly New York brand family. So we didn't evolve it that much, but we evolved it enough so that Boldly type, when used at a small size, isn't going to be difficult to read. Probably the biggest change that we brought to it is we wanted to, because of the nature of it, Boldly New York, we wanted to make it a little bit more bold. So we introduced a bolder sans serif typeface for New York, NY, and we introduced color into that mix. We also changed the shape from being a rectangle in many instances to being square. So very, very minor changes, but ones that we think are effective in making it a little bit more modern, to make it easier to reproduce, to inject a little bit of bold attitude into it. Knowing that this logo could be used now as kind of the supporting role, we wanted to make sure that it reproduced really well, small, in that kind of supporting role, and we think these changes benefited it.
So that's the portion that most people are already familiar with. Now we're going to get into the two kind of portions of the brand family that maybe people aren't quite as familiar with, are going to be seeing in the marketing kit and with more frequency. And one of those is New York Wines. this portion of the brand is essentially the consumer-facing portion of New York Wines. It's resident in a lot of the materials that we're going to be seeing later on in this presentation that are part of this global toolkit. And it's new, it's exciting to us, and it serves a lot of the purposes, again, back to that theme of unique and united at the same time. And hopefully, as we go through this small section from the brand guidelines, and when you see the actual tactics that were developed, we hope that you'll agree with that. So New York Wines, this portion of the brand is essentially what we're going to serve to wine lovers, to consumers. New York Wines have an identity all their own. They're distinct, they're inviting, and they are friendly to food. And they deserve a brand that is distinct, inviting, and friendly to people. The New York Wines sub-brand of Boldly New York is the consumer branch of the family and will be an important fixture as we disseminate the message of New York Wines to the target audiences around the globe. So we are brand purists. Born Collective is a branding agency, and we love our brand consistency. I mentioned how we came to the New York Wine and Grape Foundation after, or as the kind of the reimagination of the Uncorked New York to Boldly New York was being developed, or just shortly after it rolled out. One of my favorite parts of it is the manifesto. Of course, being a writer by trade, that might not surprise, but we think that the manifesto of Boldly New York, which is available on newyorkwines.org, really captures the spirit of the industry in this state. And because there's one for Boldly New York, we felt there should be one for New York Wines. It really kind of gained a moment of clarity when we were on some discussion with the foundation team, and we were talking about that person who walks into the wine store and they're facing the shelves, the Spain, the France, the California, the New Zealand, wherever it is, Australia and New York. What was going to motivate them to take that trip down the New York State aisle and make some choices? And it led to a manifesto that we hopefully captures the spirit of this portion of the brand. And it is kind of characterized by a bolder choice. It's easy to choose the well-trodden aisles. The Ben there had that, and the big brands owned by huge conglomerates. It's safe to opt for the hot valleys and the famous regions, and the bigger the better in the glass. And it's simple to reach for the imported labels, the hard to pronounce vineyards, and the wines of ancient kings. Easy, safe, and simple have their place in kindergarten or in car insurance, but not in wine. A bolder choice is the less beaten path, one that leads to the lesser known and the yet to be discovered. A bolder choice is small wineries with the know-how and the spirit to turn a cool climate into something elegant, friendly, and approachable. Varieties that pair well with food instead of wrestling it into submission. A bolder choice is not wine that monarchs once enjoyed, but varieties that are sought after by a new generation of enthusiasts. Young, exciting, adventurous, both wine and drink are alike. Philosophers said that wine is life, and life is a series of choices, so choose boldly. This attitude, if we can capture it, if we all represent it to the outside world, is what we think is going to influence people to steer clear from those aisles that they spent so much time in, and try New York wines, because we are convinced, as you are, that if they try New York wines, they will regularly drink New York wines. They'll advocate for New York wines to their friends, to their family, and that truly is going to raise the tide in New York State. So you've seen in the materials, even on the title page of this presentation, this new New York Wines mark. I'm going to turn it over to Dion to talk a little bit about how it was developed and why.
Sure. So while we were investigating creating a mark or a logo for New York Wines, we were also kind of in the process of understanding in all the different regions across New York State and the AVAs. So in full disclosure, the logo was developed at the same time that we were thinking about creating some maps for each of those AVAs. So one of the things that kind of was born out of that was using these circles to kind of not only represent grapes in this instance, but those circles could be transformed into a map of New York State, defining each of the AVAs. So in this mark, you'll notice that there is a series of colors. Those colors represent each AVA. So each AVA would have its own distinction. But as part of the New York Wines brand, they all kind of fall within that same grouping. So this mark is very, very simplistic, very identifiable as this kind of bunch of grapes. But it's also representational of New York State's individual AVAs at the same time.
Again, back to that theme, that runs throughout everything that we attempted to do, which is unique and unified. And I think, Deanne talked about, if I remember my presentation well, talked about those maps, and we're going to see those a little bit later on. But again, so we've developed this brand that is this sub-brand, this brand family member that's unique in its own, but it's part of that Boldly New York. And even within that brand, there are elements that are unique, but they kind of unify to form a whole. So this New York Wines new brand, how does it interact with Boldly New York? What role does each one of those play? So in these materials that you're going to see for this marketing toolkit, essentially in consumer facing materials that potentially could be consumer facing, New York Wines brand leads and Boldly New York follows. So in the communications that you're going to see in subsequent portions of this presentation, the New York Wines logo leads and Boldly New York anchors the tactics to make it clear that the brand, the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, and the spirit is really behind it all, is behind that New York brand. So you'll see a couple things here. I'm not going to really go through this bottom section. That is available in the brand guidelines. Just know that there's a lot more information, and there's a lot of iterations of the Boldly New York to allow it to take kind of that supporting role in brand elements that are really defined by, in the communications that are New York wine specific. There's different logos that you can use in different circumstances, and there's rules around that in the brand guidelines. Now that's the visual side, but there's more to a brand than just the logo. There's the messaging and there's the strategy behind each. And we wanted to touch on that a little bit, and then you'll see it all come together, hopefully on the next slide. We wanted to make sure that everything we did stayed bold, essentially. So it's important to note that this New York Wine sub-brand takes its tone and spirit from Boldly New York. Copy that's used in the execution of these within the New York Wines tactics within the New York Wines brand is informed by that same essence and voice of the umbrella brand. And that led to, along with fascinating, lengthy discussions with representatives from each one of the AVAs, to essentially, I guess you could call them taglines for each one of the AVAs that are drawn directly from the information that we gathered in those sessions. And you'll see again, and the horse is really going to be dead by the time I'm done with this, unique and unified at the same time. They're all unified by that boldly first word. It is a boldly statement, but then there's a uniqueness to each one of these AVAs and the tagline in quotes that characterizes each one. So boldly unhurried, we know time flows differently on an island. And that has on Long Island a distinct and remarkable effect on the wine they produce. Boldly intense in the Hudson River region. Maybe unlike some of the other AVAs, there's not a huge body of water that influences, and that changes the growing season and essentially the attitude to one that's very intense. Boldly energetic for Upper Hudson, the newest AVA in the state, and kind of the energy that surrounds the region and the winemaking that's happening there. Boldly ascending, the Champlain Valley, a little bit of a dual meaning there. They're certainly the highest, the northernmost AVA in the state, but also very up and coming and a great place for new people to go and set up wineries and vineyards. Boldly intricate, not one body of water in the Finger Lakes, 11 or 3 primary wine growing lakes, that have, even on each one, a really remarkable effect of the different intricacies and you know, the different varieties and subtleties of the wine that are produced in the area. Boldly confident in the Niagara Escarpment, you know, conditions that that maybe more so than any place in the state, or certainly as much as any place in the state, make it the place where in the future vinifera grapes and great wines are going to be produced. And boldly historic, kind of touching on the historic role that the Lake Erie AVA has played and will continue to play in the New York State wine and essentially you know, global wine story around the world. So these are the kind of things that, you know, some of the tactics, these graphics are made available as part of the kit. You can see, you know, they're all identified by that New York Wines logo, made up of those grapes. But then in conjunction with the AVA name and that boldly statement and tagline, you can start to see how each one of these regions is unique, and yet they're all unified under the New York Wines brand. So it, you know, that logo breaks apart to form New York State, and Long Island is pictured in blue and Hudson River region in green. So it really brings some context to the logo itself and kind of the spirit that inhabits our state. So the other brand that was portion of the brand that was created is one for New York sustainable wine growing. It's another effort that our agency is working with the foundation on. Very important in the state, and you will notice that in the materials, just like in the industry and just like in the state itself, sustainability is a thread that runs through virtually everything we do. So there's a distinct kind of sub-brand that was created for this, for the Sustainable Wine Growing Certification Program, and the efforts to get more and more vineyards and wineries to participate and become certified. But it's also one of the big selling points and a theme that's resident in all of the New York or the global messaging, marketing, and messaging toolkit that you'll see. So we'll touch quickly on that. New York sustainable wine growing, in the research that we did, one of the nice things about this, and some of the people on this call may have been participated in a similar one that we did 2 days ago for sustainable wine growing. We started by doing research. And one of the great things about this effort is that we don't have to create this audience. There is an audience out there that already exists. In our research, in our discovery process, we call them sustainability seekers, who are actively seeking out sustainably grown wines. They want to purchase it. They purchase things like that in other portions of their lifestyle beyond wine. They live their life that way, and they are active and eager and willing to pay a premium for these wines. But there's a caveat. They are not willing to continually drink sustainably grown wine unless it's excellent wine. That has to come first. If it's great wine, then they will purchase sustainably grown wine, and they'll pay more for it, which is great for everybody in the state and in the industry. So it's really that thinking, that research, that information kind of informed this tagline that defines the program, which is great wine doing good. New York Sustainable Wine Growing is a program of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, an offshoot of the Boldly New York brand. It positions the New York State wine family as leaders in sustainability initiatives and encourages vineyards to achieve certified sustainable status. In New York, we're making great wines that satisfy the new generations of wine lovers, but don't compromise the ability of future generations to do that same thing. And in New York, we have a determination to safeguard our future by taking steps to make a positive impact environmentally, economically, and socially, all important parts of sustainability. That focus is captured in great wine doing good tagline that's a hallmark of this program. The sub-brand that supports this tagline will capture both halves of that and our ability to produce truly great wine while doing good things for the future. It's not enough to grow sustainably grown wines if it's not excellent. And hopefully the brand that we put together kind of captures this. So again, back to being our kind of our brand purists, if Boldly New York and New York Wines has a manifesto, then this deserves one as well. And it should capture the spirit around our sustainability efforts and why we think it's important. So bold enough too. In New York, we're lucky enough to live in a remarkable place and work in an industry that's more passion than punching a clock. We're appreciative enough to realize every day that we're turning what nature gives us into something that gives pleasure to so many. We're aware enough to understand that everything we do relies on the soil and the water and our unique geographies, and that we're blessed enough to have some of the best in the world for doing what we do. We're smart enough to see that the world and the climate are changing. We're humble enough to know that we're here for our time, but others will follow we must consider and safeguard. And we're bold enough to do the work today that will make great wine in the future and do good for generations. It's a fairly bold thing to kind of make the investment today, knowing that it's hard, knowing that that there are considerations and compromises to be made, sacrifices to be made to do this for the ultimate long-term good. But as we know from kind of everything that defines the industry in the state, we are bold enough to do it. And hopefully this portion of the brand family captures it. So this is a trust mark that was developed. As usual, I'll kick it over to Dion because he was the brains behind the visual side of this, and he can talk about how we kind of got here.
Sure. So at first glance, you'll notice that the trust mark is actually made of wine glasses, which isn't terribly innovative, but I think the position and the use of the wine glasses make this mark pretty unique. So there's this interplay with these glasses kind of coming in and coming out, kind of symbolic of nature giving us something. At the same time, we have a responsibility to kind of take care of the environment. So it's this interplay between what we're taking and what we're giving. Also in the center of this logo, where the glasses kind of come in, you'll notice that there's a flower or a sun shape in there, intentionally to make sure that the environment is at the focus of this initiative. The coloration of the logo was also, or the trust mark was also something carefully chosen to kind of represent the air, the sky, water, and earth. But we think when this mark is pretty unique, not a lot of other organizations have something symbolic like this. So we felt it was pretty successful in representing the initiatives for sustainability, but also representing the aspect that it's our responsibility to take care of the environment.
And again, I mentioned the previous kind of webinar we did around this. There are processes and rules and certifications, and once you achieve that, this logo is available to you to use under certain conditions and circumstances. Justin Jackson's the expert on that, and can certainly be a guide to that. But that mark, hopefully you'll start seeing it on wine bottles and signs and that kind of thing to show the people who have made, and the businesses and the wineries and the vineyards that have made the commitment to becoming certified sustainable wine growers. So again, essentially a new portion of the brand. How does it interact with Boldly New York? The same way that New York Wines portion of the brand does. In instances where we're talking specifically about sustainable wine growing in that program is in the lead, and Boldly New York takes a supporting role. Boldly New York follows. So for example, on this web graphic that you might see, at the top of an email communication or something like that, certainly the focus is on the trust mark and the sustainable wine growing program, but Boldly New York is there kind of proudly sponsoring the whole thing. So we're kind of wrapping up talking about our little dissertation on brand and that kind of thing. Even in my head, there's voice saying, let's get to the stuff we came here to see. kind of summing up this brand stuff, you know, when brand is done well, kind of the magic of it is that it can talk to multiple audiences, but it can maintain a single focus. And that is kind of characteristic of the global messaging toolkit that we're going to be talking about. It does the same thing. It's going to talk to multiple audiences, but with a single focus. We want to tell people of New York's wine, variety, excellence, and overall coolness to people who will buy, taste, enjoy, share, and advocate for wine from our amazing state. To reach and influence these consumers, we'll use the fruits of our labors from hundreds of vineyards and wineries that dot our landscape. The wine will sell the wine. The excellence of New York wine is going to sell more New York State wine. It's going to convince people of the truly great wines that we're making in this state. All the marketing in the world wouldn't do that. All the messaging in the world wouldn't do that if the wine wasn't truly great. But the marketing and the messaging can help people, especially those consumers that are a little hesitant or need a little bit more convincing, to try New York State wines. And once they do that, then the marketing can step back and the wine will speak for itself. So we'll use the shelves of retailers, the warehouses of wholesalers, the cellars of sommeliers, the stories of media members as we appeal to different audiences to achieve our single bold goal. We'll be, through this toolkit, we'll be talking to consumers, we'll be talking to members of the trade and the industry, and we'll be talking and arming people in the media to be able to tell this story. So, theory, lots of words and brand and all that kind of stuff. But now it's time to kind of see the brand in action and talk about the toolkit that we've put together, how you gain access to it, how you can use it, that kind of thing. So we've accomplished much, but we will accomplish much more. The past decades have seen the New York wine family accomplish remarkable things. We've taken our place on the world stage with unparalleled experience in ripening grapes in cool climates and crafting world-class food-friendly wines. But while our reputation is growing, there are people who aren't aware of our excellence. And together, we're going to fix that with this marketing toolkit and obviously everything that you guys do so well at your individual entities. So assets are created and made available to you to use in some cases customized. Some of the assets that you're going to see, download, put them in your social media channels, send them out. They're ready for use just as is. But we also want to offer the opportunity for you to customize some of them, to add your own logo, to add your contact information for obvious reasons. It positions you as a key member of the New York State wine industry and a mover of everything that we're accomplishing. It's obviously good for the entire industry by promoting New York State wines or wines from your particular AVA, but we also want it to be good for your individual wineries, vineyards, establishments. By using them, you're helping to promote both New York wines and our universally bold attitude, both of which are increasingly bringing praise and attention to our wines. At the same time, we will help to distinguish our 7 unique AVAs, what each does remarkably well, and how they all contribute unique attitudes, expertise, and innovations to our state's illustrious past and brilliant future. One of the eye-opening things, I think, for me during this process is, kind of in our discussions and discovery, to find out there are people, in other markets around the world that want to write about New York wines, but they want to write about Long Island, or they want to write about the Finger Lakes. And by arming them with some of the uniqueness, the stats, the facts, the figure, the history of that particular AVA, it really facilitates what they're trying to do and benefits the entire state. And last, but in no way least, these assets will help bring attention and sales to your business. The New York tide is rising in the wine world, and you need to be ready to rise with it. So, the message kind of in the various mediums that we are here to see. So we want to, you know, the culmination of our discovery, research, strategy, and creative development is a suite of tools that will deliver the bold New York wine message to the world. Here is a little bit of a taste. These are all available to you on the resource page, which is our next thing we'll tackle. A poster that can be put up in retail establishments, tasting rooms, wineries, that kind of thing. Again, that does the kind of talks about the unified message that New York State wine is a bolder choice, and yet distinguishes each of the AVAs. An email series that goes out with, you know, to talk about New York State wine. Customizable trade ads. For example, if a wine trail or a particular winery wants to place, you know, an ad in a Life in the Finger Lakes magazine, for example, they can place this. There's an available area down in the right-hand corner that you'll see. They can place their own logo in it and simultaneously kind of position themselves as part of the New York wine industry and promote their own business as well. And you'll see all these materials are using the unified common New York State themes. Underdogs no more. We certainly are not underdogs in the wine industry anymore. New York knows cool, you know, a theme that we have used in various iterations, because let's all admit it, New York's a cooler place than a lot of other places in the country or in the world. And you know, there's different variations of cool in New York. There's Manhattan cool, there's Adirondack cool, there's, you know, all these different areas of cool. But it's also got that other meaning, is that we know cool climate viticulture better than anybody. And we're turning it into truly great wine. A brochure that, you know, you can put in our rack card on the thruway or wherever, or even in your own winery. New York and AVA specific information sheets. One of the things that, you know, when we were talking through the discovery process, that was very clear to us is that wineries want to make sure they arm their tasting room staff with the right information, with consistent information. We know how people, you know, at least the tourism aspect of the industry works. Somebody goes to the Niagara Escarpment and is making their tour around the wineries there. They want to know about New York wines, but they also want to know about wines made in that particular wine growing region, so that every tasting room associate there knows about the New York State story through the New York State information sheet that we're arming them with. They also know about the particular winemaking region that they're in, and of course they know about their own wine. So there's that 3 levels of messaging that this associate will be able to give to the visitor to the winery, and encourage them to drink that winery's wine, the region's wine, and New York State wine ultimately. So I mentioned I got a new laptop, and technology and I are not necessarily friends all the time. We put together a New York wine motion graphics video that we think will have a lot of different use. It's available via the resources page in a lot of different iterations and variations. It talks about New York State in general, and it also talks about each one of the AVAs. It's available in a longer version that talks about all of those, the state and all 7 AVAs. And then it's available talking about New York State and Lake Erie, you know, together, and New York State and Niagara Escarpment. So New York and each one of the AVAs together. There used to be a link in this presentation. If you'll indulge me, I think we have a little bit of time. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and start sharing, if I can find it. A bit about a little bit of that video. So bear with me. This is just a little bit. I'll play a little bit of the New York intro. Know that this is available, again, in those different iterations. and hopefully find, we envision this being able to run on any screens in a winery, a tasting room, links be made available via social media channels and that kind of thing. But to give you a little flavor of how a lot of this, everything we've shown so far has been static and flat in one sense of the word, we wanted to kind of bring it to life a little bit.
From east to west, from top to bottom, from the ocean to the Great Lakes, New York is cool. But cool comes in a lot of varieties, from the hip of Manhattan to the chill of the Adirondack Mountains and everything in between. And New York knows cool better than anyone when it comes to cool climate viticulture, growing a remarkable mix of grapes and passionately turning them into an array of delicious wines that pair well with any food or occasion. As wine drinkers, we may be more familiar with hot valleys and famous regions, and the bigger the better in the glass. But New York is boldly making world-renowned cool climate wines. And what you'll find are fine wines with a cool climate edge. They're lower in alcohol. Slower ripening grapes mean less sugar to turn into alcohol during fermentation. That results, a bit surprisingly to some, in drier wines with delightfully lighter bodies. They have higher acidity. The shorter ripening season yields a tart and balanced taste that many find refreshing. And they are incredibly food-friendly, complementing your meal instead of overpowering it. We grow an astonishing list of native, hybrid, and vinifera grapes. We're probably best known for Riesling, but we're really great at a whole list of varieties. And even though we're universally cool, we're also remarkably diverse, with 7 distinct winemaking regions populated with small, family-owned wineries, with the know-how and the spirit to transform a cool climate into something elegant, friendly, approachable, and unquestionably bold.
So hopefully I'm back on the right screen. That's just a taste of the New York section. In the longer version, it then does a similar thing for each one of the AVAs using the graphics that you've seen, the maps, the information we gathered from our discovery sessions, and that unique kind of AVA specific tagline for each one. Hopefully that is, there's a little bit of information and a little bit of entertainment at the same time. And we think, which is characteristic of how people buy wine. They want it to be entertaining. They want to be armed with information, and hopefully these motion graphics videos kind of helps that effort. You've seen this previously, the AVA graphics that are available that you can use your own. Media representatives can use the one that is most appropriate to their task at hand. So that's kind of a taste of what is available. We've made mention of newyorkwines.org/resources where you can access these materials. We want to give you the ability to download these. And I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the nuts and bolts of that, and then we'll show you some screenshots that kind of help you navigate the first time you're there. So each item, you'll find when you get there, there is, I think everything is shown in its entirety. There's a long list of tactics and materials that are available. Each one comes with a description of how we think it is best to use and the preferred mechanism for distribution. Some are intended for electronic distribution and can be downloaded and used in your social media channels and via email distribution. Others are designed to be printed at your business. They're simple enough, like some of those information sheets that we've shown. They're relatively simple in format and can be printed on typical office equipment. But still others are beyond the printing capabilities of most office printers. In these cases, we're in the process of developing a printing storefront where items will be able to be purchased, printed, and then shipped to you. And we'll see some of, there are some of those signage, those kind of things, bigger and more elaborate kind of formats that are just beyond the printing of most people. So we'll make those available for you to get your hands on. So what does this resources page look like? This is an example of what you'd see when you are there, when you first visit. The materials are available, kind of shown in thumbnail, with a description of each one that I mentioned previously. But then because it's a long list and because it's a growing list, we know that it's important to be able to filter to get more easily to exactly what you're after. And you can filter by region, by asset, and by language.
There's also a new filter, which is brand, that didn't make its way into this presentation, where you can actually look for boldly New York specific brand items, some more of the general messaging, as well as sustainability.
So you'll see here's an example of what you would see if you choose to filter. This particular user is filtering by Long Island and Finger Lakes, and then you can see the Long Island and Finger Lakes information sheets, the graphics for the two of them. And then there are things that no matter which AVA you choose that are kind of universal. The sustainability, the sustainable wine growing trust mark is available because it applies to both of those, obviously. And the same for the sustainable wine growing information sheet. You can filter by the types of assets. I want, in this case, graphics and maps and information sheets. And you can filter by language. It is a current and ongoing effort to translate these into a group of languages that will make them more easily used in different markets. The foundation is going to start with a subset of languages, and that effort will continue. And there will be more and more languages available here, so that this information can really make its way around the world and be useful. And then when you see what you want, the majority of these, such as the information sheets, you click on them, it'll offer you kind of an exploded, more detailed view. Not all of them are like that, because some will be zip files that'll have, multiple iterations of things. So that will probably start the download instantly. But in this case, you'll see, a larger view to give you a chance to examine it and say, yes, this is exactly what I want. And then you can download that asset. So hopefully very intuitive. I think Sam mentioned right at the beginning, very interested in feedback on certainly the materials that you'll find here, but if there's any feedback on the experience of, of using this resources page, please get it back to us, and that'll inform kind of different future versions of this as we move forward. So it's important to note that, we are growing more than grapes. This list of tools are growing all the time. There's an initial set of tactics that it's available for download and use. We are not done. We're continuing to add additional materials that will be instrumental in fully communicating the multiple facets of New York wine's greatness. Additional assets will be announced as they're available with email alerts from the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. And if there is anything in particular that you think would be particularly useful, boy, my winery could use this, please let us know. Right here we have Amy Ellsworth's email address that you can address any of these issues, and she will bring it to the larger group. We'll discuss them, and it may find its way into a group of future tactics that we develop. So in closing, I have been talking a very long time. We wanted to kind of wrap things up. Our story is truly overwhelming in this state, and yet it's undertold. So it's amazing, and the narrative of our bold attitude throughout the industry and across the state, the tale of the beautiful wines we're creating and the people that we're embracing, but it needs your help in its telling. Through a constant effort to tell a consistent story, the future and fortunes of New York wine, our entire industry, and your particular business will be bold and bright. We hope you use these assets to communicate the New York message to constituents and consumers around the world. And we're convinced that if you do, we'll have very cool things ahead of us. So clear my throat, open it up for questions. If you want to raise your hand, I think we have quite a bit of time left for questions, which was by design.
Hey, Dwayne, this is Val from the foundation. It seems like we presented so much information, maybe we all need to digest, but if people would prefer to talk and you do want to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can absolutely say hi and ask your questions of Dwayne and Dion. I see one question, and I'm going to go ahead and allow Andy Weber, go ahead and ask your question.
So I just wanted, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, Yep. So I just wanted to say, this is great stuff. Definitely appreciate the work that you guys in the foundation did. You know, the foundation sent us a poster, and the first thing my wife did was go out and buy a frame for it so that we could put it in the winery. So
It's great.
hats off to you guys. Round of applause. Kudos. Everyone do it. Really nice work. Thank you.
Well, thanks. We appreciate that, Andrew. It's been, from our perspective, it's been very, very rewarding, and we love, I in particular love New York wines and want to do everything I can help, and our association with the foundation has been great, and all the people we're meeting, and it's well beyond the foundation, all the winery owners and winemakers and vineyard owners, and so we're really looking forward to this, hopefully making a dent, and because it's been a great experience for us.
Thank you.
Great. And it seems like, I know Dwayne and Dion are always available to answer any questions in the future, but the foundation team and our board here is also available. And I think as people start to use these cool assets, no pun intended, they'll definitely have questions, and we're happy to take those. I think framing the poster is great, and some of the great things that you can do is maybe share some of these resources with your friends in the trade and media. There are a lot of wineries on the call right now, and just let them know that those resources are available to them as they're promoting your wines and educating people about your wine. So that's a great and easy way to start. And yeah, we're just beginning. I don't know if Dwayne or Dion, you have a few words that you want to share to wrap up, or certainly Sam, if you'd like to close us out.
Well, I just wanted to echo something Dwayne had mentioned a couple of times, which is consistency in message. And the way I like to frame it is we're all rowing in the same direction. So what I noticed when I first started in this role 7 years ago, we were doing the New York Drinks New York tours of the Finger Lakes, and we'd visit 5 tasting rooms in one day, and we'd sort of get the same version of the story of the Finger Lakes and what makes it special, and not as a criticism to those individual wineries in any way or the winemakers that talked, but we wanted to make sure that the story of the region was captured. It's told in a powerful way, the story of New York State, and so I think this is a big step in that direction where the umbrella story is sound, and we're all going to move forward in that direction, and your individual story as a winery fits into that as well, or as a wine trail or a marketing partner, and this is just the beginning. As you heard, we're going to continue to invest in these assets. It's going to evolve, so in the past things were not updated as frequently, but it's really important that we're moving forward with a coherent and consistent message about the region, and then you all can take it from there and really blow it out further. So we need your partnership to keep the boat rowing in the direction of excellence. So I just want to thank you all again for participating today, and those that are going to be watching at a later date. We're really excited about this project. It's been a pleasure working with Born Collective and Dion and Dwayne, and they got their start with us promoting New York's first great grape, Concord grape. So it's been a nice evolution, and we hope you, as Andy Weber mentioned, really love those assets that were sent out too.